Okay, so we are returning to something we started last year. We did this partly for Megilas Esther, and I think we completed it for Megillas Rus because there weren't that many. So just brief overview for those who need a refresher, or for those who weren't there. Ralbag has a style of commenting on Tanakh. Okay, he doesn't do this in every case, but many of his commentaries have three sections. So the Chumash is a commentary where he does this most consistently. He has a Bir HaMilos, a Bir HaParsha or Bir HaSipur, and then toalos. So the Bir HaMilos is where he basically goes through and he explains the terms that are difficult or controversial or confusing, and it's like a glossary. Then the Bir HaParsha or Bir HaSipur is the standard type of commentary where actually it's not so standard, is he walks you through the story. Sometimes it's standard like Rashi style where he has like a Dibur HaMaskil, like the quote from the pasuk, and then he explains it. Other times it's like he does a walkthrough through the parsha. But then the part that we're going to focus on is the toalos. So at the end of each section, he will list kind of like the moral of the story. They're not all morals. There's three categories of toalos. There's mitzvah, well, three basic categories: mitzvos, midos, and deos. So mitzvos is halachic lessons, halachic, lessons, I guess, halachic ideas. Midos is ethical or political ideas. And then deos is philosophical or metaphysical or scientific ideas. There are a couple other exceptions. Sometimes he does historical stuff. And the goal is basically to draw out lessons that you learn from the story, okay? So that you can like have a takeaway, okay? Now, he says in the introduction to his Chumash commentary that he's not trying to get all the takeaways because that would obviously be impossible. But what we noticed last time, what we did last time was we basically started from the beginning of the Megillah and we just read through his takeaways. And we were trying to do two things. We were trying to get each idea and then also get what is his derech, like what is his style of doing takeaways from the story. And we noticed a lot of things that are just very not typically what you would hear in a Devar Torah, for example. So like in the Megillah, a lot of his first toalos are basically party planning tips. Like how do you throw a party that is going to be an effective, enjoyable party. So for example, on the Megillah where it says that Vashasia Kadas Einones, that the drinking was according to the law with no one being forced, then he says basically that if you want to make an enjoyable celebration, then you don't force people to do things that they don't want to do, or for example, the weirdest one was in Megillas Rus, where there's a scene where Rus is out gathering stuff, and then in Boaz's field, and then she dips her pita, her bread in vinegar, and Ralbag has a lesson. He says, you see from here that vinegar is good for the body in the hot summer months because it cools you off, But then there's also other ideas which are very profound, deep ideas in midos and in hashkafa. So like we're not really sure what to make of these things, but you have to like keep a very open mind and be like, okay, we're going to take them at face value and see like what useful ideas can we get from it. It might involve learning stuff that we don't usually learn, or like learning stuff from people who we don't usually learn from, but that's his style. Okay. So last time we did this, we just read the toalos and then we went to the Megillah when necessary. I'm more in the mood to actually like read the Megillah and then read the toalos. So this is going to be a little bit slower going, and we're only going to have one session this year because we don't have shiur next week. But I just feel like we're going to get more out of it if we read from the story. Okay, so the last where we last left our heroine actually, Esther was not an Eov. So last time we got up through the first 35 toalos, and the last major event that happened, or the last chapter was chapter 5. So that's when Esther fasts for 3 days. She wears royal garments. She appears before Achashverosh uninvited. Achashverosh does not put her to death, but then basically says, I'll give you whatever you want, up to half the kingdom. She invites Achashverosh and Haman to a feast. So at the feast, then the king, says, okay, fine, I feel like this is not the request. You invited us here to make the request. So what is your request? So then she says, in a very, very long, elaborate way, if I found my wish, my request, if I found favor in the king's eyes, and if it pleases the king to grant me my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king had said. And so then that's for the next day. Haman goes home. On his way home, he sees Mordecai not bowing. He's all happy, but then he sees Mordecai not bowing. He gets angry. He goes and gathers his friends and his wife, and then he says he brags about all his stuff and how the queen invited him to the party. And then he says, "But nothing, all means nothing to me whenever I see Mordecai sitting at the gate." And then his wife says, "Make a post 50 cubits high, and then in the morning tell the king and let him hang Mordecai on it, and then go to the feast." So that makes Haman happy, and he makes the post. Then we come to our scene here. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I have here, for those who don't know, Neima Novetsky is Rabbi Novetsky, founder of Torah's wife, and she has been doing this incredible work of I think single-handedly translating the books of Tanakh. And the way she translates it is she translates it herself, and then she does these annotations. And what she tries to capture in the annotations is all the nuances of the Hebrew, and then any like archaeological or like modern scholarship findings that shed light on the words. So what she's trying to do is she will summarize the classical Mefarshim, but she's not trying to like summarize the ideas. She's trying to allow non-Hebrew readers to get the most out of the nuances in the text, drawing upon the classical Mefarshim and the new findings and stuff. Okay, so it's a very useful tool. I think somewhere on Torah, there is a PDF that you could print out for like to have for the Megillah reading. I highly recommend it. So I'm going to use it on here. Okay, so I'm going to read in the Hebrew, and then we'll read Neima Novetsky's translation. So, Balailahu, that night. So this is the night between. And by the way, I want this to be like learning. Okay, so even though we are focusing on the toalos, if you have a question, then raise the question. Okay, because I want to learn it, and also I need to find something to write about next week, and I haven't found it yet. So I'm looking for like things in the Megillah to write about. Okay, so Balailahu Nadada Shnas Melech. That night the king's sleep was restless. Okay, so you see here she says here Nadada. The root nadad can mean to wander or flee. In context, it can thus mean either the king's sleep was disturbed and he tossed and turned, or perhaps that sleep eluded him totally. So in other words, either he was like wandering in his sleep, or the sleep was wandering away from him. Compare the similar phrase "vatidad shnasi beinai" in Bereshis. That's what Yaakov said when he was like working for Lavan. Okay, Vayomer lahavi es sefer hazichronos divrei hayamim v'yihu nikraim lifnei melech. He said to bring the book of records, the chronicles, that they be read before the king. Vayimate kasuv, and it was found written, Asher higid Mordechai al Bigsana Vaseresh, that Mordechai had told of Bigsan and Seresh, Shnei Sarise Hamelach, Mishomre Hasaf. Okay, now this is a word that I have to explain. I'm sure she explained it earlier. Saris in Hebrew literally means a eunuch, someone who was castrated. But in Tanakh, it does not always mean that the person was castrated. I think, I don't know if I read this or if this is my assumption, basically that in the olden days, they would often castrate the servants of the king so that he didn't mess with the concubines. And so the servants of the king were eunuchs. And then later on, the term came to mean any servant of the king, even if they're not a eunuch. Okay, so not all the people who are Sarisim are eunuchs. One of the proofs that they bring is Daniel and Hanani, Mishael, Azariah, when they are in Nebuchadnezzar's palace, they're described as Sarisian, but one of the descriptions of them is that they have no blemishes on their body, because Nebuchadnezzar wanted physically perfect specimens. And so I don't know, one of the Mefarshim says like you would not call them physically perfect if they were castrated. So yeah. Okay, anyway, so two Sarisim of the king, Mishomri Hasaf, who guarded the door, Asher Bikshu Lishloach Yad B'Melech Achashverosh, that they sought to send forth their hand against King Achashverosh. So this is a reference to in the end of chapter 2. Mordecai finds out that those two are plotting to kill the king, and then Mordecai saves the king and tells it to Esther. So Vayomer Melech, the king said, Ma na'asa yakar ugdula leMordechai alzeh. What great honor was bestowed on Mordecai for this? Vayomeru na'arei hamelech mishar asav lo nasi mo davar. The king's attendants who served him said nothing was done for him. The king said, who is in the courtyard? V'haman ba lachatzer beis hamelech hachitona lemor lamelech litlos es Mordechai al ha'etz asher hechin lao. So now, so the king said, "Who's in the courtyard?" Now Haman had come to the outer courtyard of the king's house to speak to the king about hanging Mordechai on the post that he had prepared for him. Okay, so that's like the narrator talking. Yeah, Lauren.
I heard a good question today that
Yeah,
about this part. Like, why did Haman feel a need to tonight to like, you know, build this thing for Mordecai to kill, and instead of just like he was going to kill him later with all
yeah,
the Jews. So why did he have to Dafka now? Like he couldn't even stand another day of him
yeah.
and build
That's a
this
good
whole thing
question.
and risk his whole like career by going at night and
Right.
the king and everything like that.
Okay, that's a good question. I am going to write this down in my notes. Hold on just a second here. Um, okay. 1 second. So why this is on what was that 4-4? 4-4, yeah. No, not 4-4, 6-4. Um so why did Haman um feel the urgency to make this post and hang Mordecai that night, given that he was going to do this, he was going to kill Mordecai anyway, to kill Mordecai anyway, on the 13th of Adar. Yeah, that's a good question. You know what? Hold on just a second. So I have this, um, for those who don't know, let me just unblur my screen for 1 second here. We'll do our book advertisement here. How do I unblur my screen? Hold on. Okay, so this is the Mesivta Megilas Esther. Okay, for those who don't know what a Mesivta is, it's this published by Oz Vahadar. It's for Shas, but they've issued several volumes like this. Basically, what it is they try to get all the questions that can be asked on the Megillah, and then they do a digest of what all the major, not all the major, all the Mefarshim. They try to do all the Mefarshim say to answer the questions, and they just have them in the back in summary form. And so a lot of the a lot of the people they quote the traditional like Rishonim and Mefarshim on the Mikros Gedolos, but they quote so many like uh other obscure books that I feel like they're just making up names, like I just every single name I read I've just never heard of before, which is not, it doesn't mean anything. But so I'm just really quickly looking this up to see if they answer this question. I bet it would actually be on the previous parak about why he felt the need to do this. Then okay, hold on a second here. Yeah, okay, hold on a second here. Okay, I see a question here that says why specifically in the morning. I just want to skim this here. Okay, no, that's talking about like why in the morning hours. Okay, I think it's best if I look into this, and if I find any answers, then I can share them in the chat. Okay, but it's a good question. I never thought of that before. Yeah, Tamar?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
Okay.
I could give like a type of answer. It's not a whole
Sure.
answer.
Yeah.
That I've heard. I think this is probably from Rebbe, but I don't remember exactly, so I'm just gonna
Sure.
say, caveat.
Yeah.
I think you can fold it into the general type of rishus of Haman that he okay, wait, this maybe is like this is maybe gonna be like a whole idea, so like a longer idea that I'm not gonna be able to fully capture, but maybe it was something about the fact that like his whole thing was like his own greatness, and obviously that was why Mordecai bothered him so much.
Right.
But the fact that it's sort of like he was like having the experience of enjoying being invited to the queen's party, and it says he was happy in the pasuk.
Yeah.
And having that clash, like he just couldn't tolerate it. Like something about that, like finally like his dreams were coming true, and like at that moment he couldn't handle it anymore. He couldn't like be balanced and think about a good plan.
Right. Yeah, I think that I must have heard similar shiurim because that's the idea I have in my mind also. And I think the critical point here in terms of the way it's expressed is Haman left that day happy and merry of heart, but when Haman saw Mordecai at the gate and he did not rise and did not tremble before him is a very interesting phrase here. It's not that he didn't bow down. That was what he was mad about the first time. This is he didn't stand up and didn't tremble before him. Let's see what even Novetsky says, tremble. The word za only appears a handful of times in Tanakh, see Habakkuk 2:7 and Kabbalah 12:3, where the context suggests that it refers to trembling and fear. Alternatively, he did not budge. I think that's how it's usually translated. That Mordecai made no movement at all, refusing to show either honor or fear. I think I heard Rebbe explain it to me. It's just like almost like Mordecai just doesn't even like notice Haman, and like that is what really got to him. But I like the way you said it in terms of like puncturing the ultimate fantasy. Haman was like enjoying, it's like it'd be like if someone was an Olympic athlete and like was getting the gold and like someone like interrupted that in a way that punctured the whole thing. Yehudis?
Okay, I have a question actually. So between puzzles 3 and 4, right?
Yeah.
Gimel and Dalet, I don't know if this is just the style of the Megillah, but it feels like there's something missing. Like it's extremely jarring to go from end of a conversation to wait, who's in the courtyard? So I'm not sure if we're just supposed to assume that there was a noise or something. But...
So I actually, right before this, was learning with Eliana Katzman, and we did a deep dive on Pasuk 4 about the question that she had was what prompts the king to just say who's in the courtyard? Seems to kind of come out of nowhere, and then it switches into like this narration mode. Now Haman had come to I don't know why she gets it says now, but the Haman ba lachatzer beis hamelech hachitona lemor lamelech litlos as Mordechai ha'etz. Haman, it's like giving this backstory here, and then it goes back to the dialogue. So it is a little jarring. The answers we found, in fact, I could show this to you. Hold on. Let me just stop sharing the screen for 1 second. And I don't know if this is going to answer your question because I don't know what aspect you're finding jarring. I think there's several things that are a little jarring there.
I can't explain. I mean, I'm interested to hear whatever you're going to share, but just specifically, I was thinking it feels like there's literally a piece of information missing that would normally be in the narrative. Like you have something happening and then you have a transition where it's like there was a noise in the courtyard and the king says, who's out there? And that part is missing.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. So that's how I always pictured it. I always pictured it as he hears like rustling in the bushes and Haman's like creeping there, like looking at him. But apparently that's not how the Mefarshim do it. So this is what the Mesivta looks like, by the way. So it has the topic and then the question, and then it has the summaries of the answers. Okay, so I'm not going to read all of them. I want to read the ones that are compelling. Okay, that answer that question. Hold on a second here. Yeah. Okay. So I liked the first. Oh, so this first answer is very good if it's true, but I don't know if it's true. Okay, I've never heard of this midrash. Midrash panim acherim, other faces. Okay. Amru shehaman nichnas b'chatzer hamelech bli reshus, that Haman entered into the courtyard without permission. L'chein shalmi b'chatzer, and that's what prompted him to ask who's in the courtyard. Okay, so what this is saying basically is like we have this backstory about how there's a rule that you don't just barge into the king's courtyard, and if you do, then that's like worthy of the death penalty. And so, according to this interpretation, Haman like barged in, or at least went into the courtyard in a place where he wasn't permitted to, and that's what prompted the king to say who's there. It was in response to Haman coming in. The reason why I don't think it's true is because I don't think this is the same courtyard. You're not allowed to go to the courtyard in the inner palace where the king's throne is. I don't think this is in the king's throne room, so I don't think that would apply. But if it did, or if there was a similar law, then like the disturbance of anyone approaching, this would be like in in Buckingham Palace, like if you went into like, the place where into the residence, like some stranger there. So that would be what prompted it. This other answer I like, which is Yeshua, it doesn't say who said this. Shabikesh Achashverosh Achare Sar V'Gadol Kadesh Yuchal Lihisiyait Imo Bamele Hetivim Mordechai. So Achashverosh was looking for some officer who he could take counsel with about what to do for Mordechai. And that's why he asked who's in the courtyard. That the way of the ministers is to always be ready for the king's beckoning in the courtyard. So in other words, that fits in very well with the language here, that he asked what honor was done for Mordechai for this. The attendants say nothing was done. So then the king wants to summon an officer. So he says, who's out there, meaning who can come and I can confer with. So that fits in really well with the pshat.
Can I actually, sorry,
yeah.
just backing up to like the Megilas, the first response you had.
Yeah.
I just remembered I was learning with Jessica, and she was explaining to me that Ahasuerus is like a paranoid character at this point, where he's like extremely afraid.
Yeah.
And actually, now I'm thinking like when you're reading here, like Megilas, first I was thinking, were you saying like, oh, who dares to be in the courtyard, right? But
Yeah.
now I'm wondering, is it meant to be this way where you're seeing the paranoia because we don't hear a sound, but he's still saying like, who's there? Like he heard something tiny.
So I was just gonna read that the answer. So there's two versions of that answer. Okay, there's one that Chazal give. Okay, which is Chazal Amru shebemeshech kol halayla ha'achashverosh cholim shehaman al gabav umavakesh lahorgo b'cherev shebiyado. Apparently this is a mitzvah that they teach kids. I've never heard of this before. That that all night Haman Achashverosh was dreaming that Haman was standing over him and trying to kill him with a sword. And that in the dream, I guess, Haman took off Achashverosh's royal mantle and his crown. And then once he woke up, he said, "Who's in the courtyard?" And once he knew that Haman was waiting outside, Amar Belibo, he said in his heart, maybe there's some truth in the dream that Haman wanted to kill him. So this does not explain, this talks about the paranoia, and clearly on an unconscious level, Esther had planted this doubt in his mind, and he saw Haman like clamoring for power, and so like maybe that was why he was paranoid. This one doesn't exactly explain like why he woke up and immediately asked who was in the courtyard. But the second one I think fits in more with what you're saying, okay, which is the Eshkol HaKofer, another book I don't know. So once it was clear to Achashverosh to see that among his servants there were people who were trying to kill him, because remember he just reviewed in the Chronicles that Bigsan Asherosh tried to kill him. Sha'al mi b'chater, he asked, who's in the courtyard? Shema yesh gam ata misha mahalach b'chatzero v'choresh alav raos. Maybe there's someone who's creeping out in the courtyard who's trying to plot evil against him. And remember, what was the job of Bigsan and Seresh? Like, what was their actual like function in the government? I don't know if you caught it.
Guards.
They were guards, right? So they were the people who were like outside of the the places where the king is vulnerable. Once they said to him that Haman is standing there in the dead of night, b'chatzero, in his courtyard, he was like, oh, this guy's definitely trying to get me. Okay, so like I think that's the more like, I call this like the horror film mi b'chatzer. Like he hears the creaking and he's like, who's out there, so I think that fits in with what you were saying. So I agree with that answer. I think that's good.
I actually didn't wasn't thinking about how Bigsan and Seresh, like that's some major trust issues that actually you don't even need Esther for that. Like you've got the people who are supposed to protect him that actually try to kill him. Like of course he's already spiraling in this way.
Right. And not only that, but hold on a second. I was reading. Oh, here we go. Second book. What do you call advertisement? For those who are familiar with the Magid series from Koren, this is the Esther book. This is Esther: Power, Fate, and Fragility in Exile by Erica Brown. And this series is it's different authors, but they usually try to have a blend of modern scholarship and literary analysis, and classical mafarshim. So she points out something that I never noticed, which I just want to make sure, or I want to read it from her. If I can't read it from her, then I will. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah. So she quotes Edward L. Greenstein from the Scroll of Esther. Oh, so sorry. Let me read what she says. She says like this. Okay, Greenstein suggests, this is Erica Brown. Greenstein suggests that the Persians who were supposed to support the king rarely fulfill their roles. While he does not single out Bigsan and Sterish, they follow the pattern he identifies. So, quote from this Greenstein guy: in each instance, an ethnic Persian had disappointed the king. First, his wife Vashti, then his viceroy Haman. When the king overcame his exaggerated rage, as related in parallel verses, he elevated Jewish counterparts who pleased him, Esther and Mordecai. This dynamic is not marginal, but cuts straight to the core meaning of the story. Jews are not bad, but good for Persia. That's actually not the thing that I wanted to read. Hold on. I thought there was a thing. I thought I remember reading that, like, it was very common that Persian kings were killed by people in their court. I thought I read that. Maybe I was imagining it. But
I think
anyway,
historically,
yeah,
like further back in history, in a lot of cultures, that was very common, like
yeah,
in English, but also Asian cultures. Like, you were talking about people constantly cycling through rulers, etc., because they kept
right,
killing them to take over.
yeah, yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so now we are up to oh, you know what? We skipped past the first toeles almost. Oh no, not yet. Okay, so oh, also there was another commentary here that said about the order. Okay, so this is interesting. The Seder Haksuvim. Batam Shlohis. So how would you think this should be written? Should be written now. Haman had come to the outer courtyard of the king's house to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the post he had prepared for him. Then the king said, "Who is in the courtyard?" Then the king's attendants told him, "Behold, Haman is standing in the courtyard." So, but it's written in this weird order. So this Batam Shlohis Tchila Shaba Haman Lachatzer Beis Hamelech. Lomar Shashal Hamelech Mi B'Chatzer V'Chazar V'Amaru Ba Haman. So why does it not first mention Haman was there? Why does it say that the king said who's in the courtyard and then Haman came? Be'er Ora V'Simcha, another commentary I haven't heard of. Shebashah Shashal Hamelech Mi B'Chatzer Adayin Lo Haya Haman B'Chatzer Ela B'Darcho Eleha. So you could read it that when the king asked who's in the courtyard, Haman had not arrived yet, but he was on his way there. Achein hamelech dima bedato shedmus adam nitzeves b'chatzer v'lechein shal mihu hanitzav sham. The king just imagined that someone was there and said who was there. V'alkein heshivalo shahaman hu bedarcho el hachatzer. And then that's why the narrator steps in and says Haman was on his way to the courtyard. V'lechein kasuv. And then this is a good diok, a good inference here. V'haman ba lich lachatzer. Ba, is it lachatzer? Yeah, ba lachatzer. And Haman came to the courtyard. As opposed to velo bachatzar hamelech, that Haman was in the courtyard. Ki adayin lo ba b'soch hachatzer elahaya b'darcho eleha. So the you could read the pesukim very smoothly in Hebrew. V'yomer melech mi b'chatzer. The king said, "Who is in the courtyard?" No one was there. Then the narrator says, "V'Haman ba," and then Haman came lachatzer to the courtyard of the king, and then the servants of the king announced that Haman was there, so that it flows smoothly there. Okay. So then the king said to Haman, wait. Oh, lemor lemelech liflos as Mordechai al ha'etz asher hechin lo, to tell the king to hang Mordechai on the post that he had prepared for him. Vayomeru nare hamelech elav. And oh, hold on just a second. Actually, there's another fun fact, I think. Did they hang Bigsan and Zeresh? Yeah, okay. So the phrase hanging on a post. So Novetsky says, see Hoyle Moshe, who suggested the first refers to crucifixion, and eitz means a wooden post rather than a tree. crucifixion was a form of capital punishment practiced extensively by Persians. Okay, so that's just not what you typically hear in your rendering of the Purim story, but it also kind of makes the 50 cubits. Is that how tall it was? 50 cubits high. I don't know if it makes it better, but like it's a different image, 50 cubit high, like a crucifixion as opposed to like a hanging. Hey, it feels like a little, I mean, like, I don't know, maybe I don't know how their hangings work, but whatever. Okay. So then one more pasuk and then we'll do the Ralbag. So Haman came and the king said to him, what shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor? Vayomer Haman belibo, and Haman said to himself, Lami Yahweh Tamelech Lasos Yakaro Yoser Mimeni. Whom would the king desire to honor more than me? Okay, so let's go to the Ralbag. So here's what the Ralbag says. Okay, now remember, this is Ralbag toalos. This one's going to strike us as a little mundane. So our goal is going to be, what further idea can we get out of this? Okay, so he says, I'm going to read it in English. This is ChatGPT's translation, which I did review. Toeles hashloshim v'shishahu b'midos. The 36th lesson is in Midos. This teaches that it is proper for every person to pay back those who have done good to them. Halo tira, don't you see? Ki teref sheshama hamelach ma shesibiv bo Mordechai hatzalaso, that as soon as the king heard about the salvation that Mordechai brought about for him, im shulam leMordechai gumul azeh. He asked if Mordechai had been rewarded for this. V'zemi ma shehura shekvar haya roy lo al kolpanim l'shalim lo gumul al ma shehitiv lo. And this shows that it was right for him to repay Mordechai for what he did for him, for the good he did for him. And for that reason, he asked Haman what should be done for the man whom the king wishes to honor. Okay, so our question, which again, I don't know if this is even a legitimate question, but our question is like, what's the chiddush? Okay, or like what's a chiddush? What's a new insight we can get out of this? Like, what can we learn beyond the simple, like, repay kindness with kindness? What do you say? Yeah, Lauren?
Well, it is interesting that like he is the king and he also feels this need to repay, you know what I mean,
Right.
Mordecai.
That's a good point.
Because it's like he, rules over the kingdom. Of course you should do that if you hear that happening.
Okay, that's a good answer, right? So let me start with that. So Lauren's answer is you might think that the king is above all this, okay? And and in some societies, he probably is. There are these societies where the king can literally just confiscate any property that he wants. I doubt that king is paying back kindness. Certainly not in a consistent way. And you got to remember, Mordecai is maybe this is gonna be a separate answer. Okay, I have a separate answer after this. So okay, good. That's a good answer. Yeah, Ayala.
Another thing based off of his language is the immediacy of it, that like as soon as Achashverosh saw it, like you shouldn't wait a second because then like other things can come up.
Right. Okay, good. So so it's fine. Although the he initially missed the window of opportunity, as soon as he became aware of it, he started planning on how to repay Mordechai. Yeah, now let's just elaborate on that. So did you give a reasoning for why the immediacy was important, or you just noted it?
I was saying because just like practicality, other things can come up, but I didn't have time to think about this so much, but I wonder if there's also like a psychological factor that like if you don't do it immediately, like you're prone to like pushing it off and
okay, yeah. So there's a practical reason, which is you don't want to forget, and there may be reasons to forget. I'm gonna go ahead and summarize an idea that Ayala already heard, and maybe Tamar as well, from Tehillim. We recently went over the idea in Tehillim about this is a side point, but it's a good one. We say this, I'm going to quote the version in Hallel, even though we learned it elsewhere. David Melech says, in Tehillim Kuftes Zayin, Yud Daled. Nedarai Ladashem Ashalem Negda Na L'Holamo. I will repay my vows sorry, 12. Ma Ashiv Lashem Kol Takmalohi Alai. What can I how can I repay Hashem back? How does she say it? How can I repay Hashem for all his dealings with me? Yeah, that Kol Takmalohi is difficult. Kosi Shuas Asa, I raise a cup of salvation, so Hashem and Hashem Ekra, and I call the name of Hashem. Nedarai Hashem Ashalem Negdan Al Cholamo. My vows to Hashem I will repay in front of all of his people. So the question is like, yeah, obviously you're going to pay back your vows. That's what you're luckily obligated to do. So like, what vows is he talking about here, and why is it such a big deal that he's repaying them? So the Radak clarifies what kind of vow it is. Nedarai Ladashem Ashalem, Hanadarim Shanadarti Kishayisi Boreach V'Goleh, the vows that I made when I was fleeing and in exile, Im Yishvina Kelavesi, the vows that I made, if God returns me to my house, then I will pay these vows. Osam Hanadarim Ashalem Ata Neged Kolamo. Those vows I will pay back now in front of all his people. So the idea we said is that that there is, when you're in a state of need or catastrophe, it's very easy to focus on the bottom of the hierarchy of needs, on like your physical survival and like, just getting through this, and to lose track of your values. So, and it's also easy to forget about Hashem, So if you make a neder in that time, so what you're doing is you're doing an act of avodas Hashem now, because a neder is a halakhically significant act now that commits you and creates a debt to pay back in the future. You're anchoring yourself in your values of gratitude to Hashem, but what you're and that keeps you grounded in values higher than just worrying about your survival. But the reason I'm bringing those up now is you're also creating a debt that you're going to have to pay when you get out. So what usually happens is you're in a state of vulnerability, and you recognize how vulnerable you are, and you ask Hashem to save you. And then when you get out, you just move on with your life, or you take it for granted, or you like forget about it, or you just say, okay, fine, obviously like I'm out. And that's a bad thing. But if you make a vow to Hashem, it will remind you to give thanks. And what David is doing is he's giving public thanks, So similarly, I think it is good that the Ralbag doesn't mention the Sefer HaZichronos, but it's very good that the king has this policy where all good deeds are written down so that you can make sure that you don't forget anything. And then when he was reminded of it, then like Ayala said, he leapt into action and didn't want to forget it anymore, because it's very easy to forget stuff, because everyone deep down feels that, of course, good things should happen to me, and I don't owe anyone anything. And if you're the king, then you're going to feel that way even more. Yeah, Lauren?
I wonder if this maybe it relates to like what we were talking about earlier about him being paranoid, because I'm wondering if maybe he felt like, if I'm paranoid, Haman and Esther, what's going on,
right?
And maybe he wanted to like read that book. Did I forget anything? Like, because he obviously did forget to repay them. So it's many years later.
Right.
So anyway, but I mean, yeah. So it's like also thinking, maybe that led him to like, oh, I missed this, so now let me try to get things. It's also good for his kingdom too, because then his suspects will, not suspects, whatever you call them, subjects, right, will be more respectful and be good citizens.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So his thoughts were paranoid that night. So perhaps he was making sure to cover his bases to make sure he didn't overlook anyone, and by publicly rewarding loyal citizens, he is increasing goodwill and that's one word, right? Goodwill and loyalty among his subjects, and preventing another Bigsan Viserys incident. Yeah, Hoodie?
Just like actually also sort of on this like public aspect, but more specifically going back to like those sentences here where he says, it ends by saying like, for this reason he asked Haman what should be done. Kind of like he didn't just keep it in his mind and then decide like later write it down somewhere and then do it privately. He kind of made the whole is that also maybe something about kind of grounding, like you were saying about how you want to ground it with the neder, et cetera, and also by kind of like acknowledging publicly when someone does something for you instead of just rewarding privately, you're again not only maybe having this humble aspect where you kind of have to, it just makes everything more real, like acknowledging that, like, you know.
Yeah. So by involving other people in his repaying of Mordecai's good, he is further publicizing it and creating accountability partners, right? To partners to make sure that he actually gets this done. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, but also I would say that's like a personal character thing. Like if somebody is doing something good for you, and then you kind of again, it makes you kind of have to go a little further, where you can't just sweep. It's harder to sweep it under the. It's not just accountability, but also just I don't know. Unless I'm wrong, I don't know.
I don't understand what you're saying. Say it again.
I feel like in terms of like Ahasuerus himself, like not just that the action that he has accountability, so he has to do it, but it's almost like it elevates the person who is acknowledging the good because he's doing it, and it's like publicly is a higher level than if he just did it privately, because it's kind of like he has to lower himself a little bit in front of more people by acknowledging it publicly versus just privately with Mordecai saying, "Here is your reward, thank you so much." He has to show everyone, "I needed this help, I accepted this help. You know, I can't do everything myself," kind of thing.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So it reinforces this gratitude for himself, which appropriately humbles him by recognizing his his I guess like dependence on others and his need for others to help him.
Yeah, which I would say as a king, especially, like again, wouldn't that be even more important because they're more susceptible to believing
Right.
themselves like on a godlike level.
Yeah, this is especially important for a king. Okay, I had a thought about this also, that tied specifically to the king. Give me 1 second. Oh yeah, so I think we have Mishlei pesukim about this. About give me 1 second. Yeah, so there's a Mishlei pasuk that I don't remember what parag it's in. Ra'a tachas tova. Yeah, Mishlei 17:13. Meshiv ra'a tachas tova lo tamush ra'a mi beso. One who repays good with bad, then badness will not depart from his house. So I this is the pasuk. I think I wrote this up and I called it Mishlei karma, um, which is that there's a natural psychological expectation of reciprocity that people have, that it's just natural to assume if I do something good for you, you'll do something good for me. So if you undermine that or thwart that in any way by not paying back good with good, or worse, by repaying good with evil, so you're going to create resentment among the people who are in your house or in your system, and that will result in them not wanting to do good for you, in them wanting to take revenge on you, in them being lax with other things that the other rules that they have in that house, because why should I do good if it's not going to be appreciated, or if all I'm going to get is bad, and what it also does is, if what kind of a person would do such a thing, what kind of person would pay back good with bad? Someone who is extremely egocentric and just expects, it's like in Pirkei Avos, what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. That's the kind of person who's going to like receive good and then just treat the other person disrespectfully, or pay back good with bad. And that egocentric mentality is also going to cause you to take everything personally even more. So for someone who's in a king's position, it's especially important for him to repay good with good, so that he doesn't generate resentment from other people, and so that he diminishes his own egocentrism. So I'm just gonna type this for my notes purposes here, which is Mishlei 17:13. Yeah. Okay. I think this satisfies the Chiddush. Okay, we got stuff out of this. Yeah. You know what this reminds me of also? I've said this a lot, that in one of the differences between Mishlei and American proverbs is an American proverb, the ikar of an American proverb is the idea, okay, or the advice, so they're designed to be the simplest possible, and like once you get the idea out of it, then that's it, so the early bird gets the worm, or an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Once you get the idea, then that's it. But Shlomo proverb is teaching you ideas, but the essential benefit comes from thinking about the subject through the lens of the pasuk. And as you're thinking about it and discussing it, it opens up a whole area of benefit, of beneficial ideas and thinking. So I feel a similar thing with these toalos here, that what the Ralbag said is very simple, and the takeaway is very simple, is you should repay good with good. But the type of analysis that I like here is when we explore the topic and then get other ideas out of that topic, so I think that's like this is helping us in terms of the derech of approaching this here. Yeah, Hoodie.
Sorry, can I just add one small thing also?
Yeah.
Just to your last point about the Mishlei, it sounded like you were talking more about, let's say, like a narcissistic personality of someone who believes everything's coming to them.
Yeah.
But I would suggest that there's another type of personality where this would happen with as well, which is someone who is, let's say, very defensive or paranoid, like in this case, where they're like afraid of having to receive help or anything like that. Just to tie it back again.
Right. Yeah, that's I forgot that paranoia is also a very egocentric mentality. Everything has to do with me. And so yeah, that paranoia pairs well with this, and this can combat the root of the paranoia if you practice this, because it diminishes the ego. Okay. Let me just take note of where the Ralbag's next toalos is. Okay, yeah, this is an interesting one. Okay. All right, so now let's go on. I think we're only going to get through 2 today. That's fine. We did 35 last year. We'll do 2 this year. Okay, but we were going at a fast clip last year. I'm more in the mood for slow this year. Okay, so what happens? Vayomer Haman el Hamelach. So this is his answer to the question. Ish asher Hamelach chafetz bikaro. The man whom the king desires to honor. Yaviu levush malchus asher lavash bo hamelach. Let him bring royal clothing that the king has worn, the sus asher rachav alav hamelach, and the horse upon which the king has ridden, va'asher nitan keser malchus barosho, and on whose head a royal crown was placed. Okay. Now this is another kind of a weird thing here. So Neima Novetsky says, see Ibn Ezra that the words his head refer back to the horse, noting that there was a practice to place a crown on the king's horse to mark it as his. Alternatively, you can read it as, okay, so this is translated, and on whose head a royal crown was placed. Alternatively, you can read it as when the royal crown was placed on his head, reading asher as ka'asher. And I think I read in one of the Mefarshim that means that he doesn't just want the horse that was crowned, he wants the horse while it's wearing the crown. A third reading suggests, and the royal crown that was put on his head, that was put on his head, meaning on the person's head. Rashbam, who switched the word, Ibn Janach and Rashbam, who switched the word order to present Haman as suggesting that the man must be adorned with a royal crown. According to this last reading, it is surprising that the crown is not mentioned in the continuation. Okay, we're going to get into this part. Yeah, okay, fine. So then he goes on and he continues, V'nason halavush v'hasus al yad ish misare hamelach, and let the clothing and the horse be given into the hand of one of the king's noble officers, hapartimim. Okay, that's the partimim. V'hilbishu esa ish asher hamelach chavitz bikaro, and they shall dress the man whom the king desires to honor. V'hirkivuhu al hasus birchov ha'ir, and they will lead him on the horse through the city square. V'karu lefanav kacha ye'aseh la'ish asher hamelach chavitz bikaro, and they shall call out, so shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. Okay, so then what happens? Vayomer hamelach lahaman the king said to Haman, Maher, hurry, kach es halavush es asus kasher dibarta. Take the clothing and the horse as you have spoken. Va'asechen leMordechai haYehudi asher hayoshev b'shar hamelech al tapal davar mikol asher dibarta. And do this so to Mordechai the Judean who sits in the king's gate. Do not omit anything from all that you have spoken. Okay, so let's look at the Ralbag here. Okay, and then we're going to compare it to a Rashi. Okay, Ralbag says like this. I'm actually just going to read this in the English because it's going to flow smoother. The 37th lesson is in character traits. It is to teach that it is not appropriate for a person to take from what the master is willing to give more than what would be burdensome for the master to give. Surely you can see that when Haman was asked by the king to do what to do for the man whom the king wishes to honor, he made his request in a way that led the king to suspect that Haman believed the king intended to honor him. So in other words, when it said in the previous pasuk that Haman said to himself, whom would the king desire to honor more than me? So yeah, he was saying that to himself, but then when he made this request, it became evident to the king that Haman thinks that I'm talking about him. Therefore, Haman asked for the honors that were just short of the throne itself, requesting to wear royal garments that the king himself had worn, to ride on the horse the king had ridden, to have the royal crown placed on his head. Let me just make sure that that's a correct translation here. Okay, so it's equally ambiguous. These honors were to be bestowed by one of the king's most noble princes. However, when Haman suggested that it be proclaimed before the man whom the king wishes to honor, it inadvertently caused the king to react against him and instruct him in a tone of rebuke to do all of that for Mordechai the Jew without omitting anything. This also led to Haman being summoned to Esther's feast in a manner of rebuke, as the king said, hurry and take Haman to Esther's banquet, compounded by the king's jealousy toward him because of Esther's request that the king and Haman come to the banquet she had prepared for them, as previously mentioned. Okay, so in your own words, first of all, let's just get a shot here. So what is Ralbag saying this lesson is, and how do we see this from what Haman did? Wow, it is windy outside. Okay. Yeah. So what's just basic summary here? What's his lesson? Yeah, Hoodie.
I guess be careful when you're taking things from somebody,
Yeah.
not to overtake
Exactly.
too much.
Yeah. Be careful when taking what someone offers to give, not to take too much. I was trying. There must be an English proverb.
There is. It's like the idea of like ask for something about inch to mile, like take an inch or whatever, like offer an inch, take a mile, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
About that.
I was getting mixed up because I was thinking like there's the I was thinking you can make up a new one, which is people say don't bite the hand that feeds you. I would say don't eat the hand that feeds you, like biting off more than you can chew. But I think I'm mixing up two proverbs here, right? So be careful with what someone offers to give, not to be careful when taking what someone offers to give, not to take too much. Okay. So then here's what we have to read carefully here. Okay. What set the king off? What was the straw that broke the camel's back here? Yeah, Tamar?
It sounds like it was the person proclaiming it.
Yeah. Okay, right. So here's the thing. I have read this Rashi. Okay. I think I actually put this in a separate document. Yeah. In case I want to write an article about this. Okay. So in the Megillah, Rashi picks up on the fact that Haman asks for the levush malchus, okay, for the royal clothing, and then the sus, the horse, and then the keser, malchus, the royal crown, okay? But then in the very next pasuk, which is still mid-sentence, he just says the levush and the sus, just the clothing and the horse, okay? So Rashi picks up on that, and Rashi says, V'nasun halavush vasus, es hakeser lo hiskir, but Haman didn't mention the crown. Shira'a eno shel melech ra'a al she'amar sheyitnu hakeser barosh adam. He saw that the king was jealous or stingy. Ayin ra means jealousy, but it also means a certain like wanting to withhold stuff. So I don't know, stingy is the best word. There's got to be a better word for that. He saw that the king was stingy al sha'amar shitnu hakeser brosh adam, over the thought of the crown being placed on the head of another person. So, excuse me. So this is how I had always learned it. That the thing that upset the king was he sees Haman like asking for the royal garment, the royal horse, and then when Haman says, "And I want the crown on my head," the king's like, "Whoa, you have overstepped your bounds." Okay, but the Ralbag says, Shamar Ayid Ishamel Pardomim Va'od Lo Achamalucha Lule Masha Amar Yikru Lefanav Kacha Yasa Leisha Shahamel Chavetz Bikaro. So Vini Lazos Hasiba Hispal Hamelch Kenegdo. Vamar Lo Belashan Kintor Shiaz Zel Mordechai Yehudi. So Ralbag says, however, when Haman suggested that it be proclaimed before the man whom the king wishes to honor, it inadvertently caused the king to react against him and instruct him in a tone of rebuke to do this for Mordechai the Jew. Yeah, Hoodie?
To me, it just seems like the next step over. Like, it's not disconnected. He's in this theme again where he's like, oh, Haman wants to take over. Haman really covets the kingdom, the crown. And then he actually verbalizes it. He says, put the crown on me, but not just, publicly where people, because Haman already is like really right below Achashverosh, right? He's basically the most powerful person under Achashverosh. So you're talking about like politically, you have perhaps this would incite or maybe convince other people, oh, even the king thinks Haman is, this level or whatever it is. So it's just another level of like, put the crown on me. And then he kind of hits his limit when he wants it to be publicly proclaimed that this is a man you should look up to and like, etc. and draw attention.
Okay, so I agree with you, but I still am unsatisfied. Okay, so the question I have here is like, the main question is, what is the root of the machlokes between Rashi and Ralbag here? Okay, Rashi says that the straw that broke the horse's back was Haman asking for the crown, whereas Ralbag says, holds that Achashverosh was apparently fine with Haman wearing the crown, okay, but he was not fine with parading him around and having someone declare, this is what is done for the man the king wishes to honor. Okay, so like, to me, like, I don't understand Ralbag. Okay, and Hoodie, I think you're giving a good like approach to it, but I would like to understand the machlokes here. In other words, like why would the king be okay? Like, why would the king be okay with Haman wearing the crown, okay, and be okay with parading Mordechai around? And again, I think you are on the right track here, but I just want to like flesh it out. And if we could really define the machlokes, that would make me happy. Yeah, Fega?
Could it be that he's saying that this is who the king wishes to honor, and it's not like it's his idea. So by saying that this is what happens, he's saying that this is what the king wants. I'm the king, basically. Like he becomes
that's interesting.
The king.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, so in other words, it was Haman. It was not the request that upset the king. It was the Haman basically like so deep in this king fantasy that like he is, putting words in the king's mouth, so to speak, of saying and you're gonna have people tell everyone how much you love me, and like want me to be honored, and that's where the king, that was too far. Yeah, okay, I like that idea. Anyone have any other ideas or a way to encapsulate it as like what exactly are Rashi and Ralbag disagreeing about. I do like that though. I do want to like develop that. Yeah, Lauren.
I don't know if this like completely fits, but one thing I was thinking about how it's interesting, like Rashi seems to focus on Haman like becoming the king. You know, he's wearing the crown, wearing the royal things, but Ralbag, it seems to me like other people's perceptions, like
I
the
was trying to
rest
think
of the
along those lines also.
community,
Right.
or the kingdom thinking about like treating Haman as the king, given that he has so much power.
Right.
So I don't know, but yeah, I'm not sure how to phrase it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that also. And who do you say what you were saying again? It was similar to that also, right? About the political thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like the public nature of it, where it almost seems like he's telling the king to support him publicly as like
Right.
a figure who's king-like. But I also want to say that with all of this, this is all supported by the idea that he specifically said don't omit anything about Mordechai, because he knew about the conflict between Haman and Mordechai. He knew that Mordechai had that Haman had the sticking point where Mordechai was the only one who wasn't acknowledging him as this really high level person. So here he's saying he's taking him down a notch because if we're saying that all of this is like the king worried about Haman trying to take over, then this is him saying, make sure you know.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Let me just get this down first. So it's the public spectacle, and its political ramifications that upset the king, not the, I think Rabbi Foreman in one of the Aleph Beta videos described it as like Haman like playing dress up, not the mere fact that Haman wanted to play dress up. In other words, like there are kings who would be upset about someone just wearing their crown, like per se. But then for others, it's the public the public perception or the spectacle about it. Yeah, Yehudi.
Yeah, I think this is also saying like this is just confirming for the king that Haman does want to take over for him. Like he's been paranoid this whole time, and now he's been worried this whole time because Esther's been feeding him this like subtle thing, and then he's saying this is just he really thinks he wants to legitimize kind of thing.
Yeah, actually wants to usurp his position. Okay, I think this is good. Maybe we can get it clear, but I don't want to really work on it right now. Okay, let's actually just go and finish chapter 6. Okay, I think that would probably be a good place to stop here. So what happens is Vayikach Haman es halavush es asus vayalbesh es Mordechai vayarkivihu bircho vayir vayikra lefanav kacha ye'aseh la'ish asher hamelech chavis bikaro. Haman took the clothing on the horse and he dressed Mordechai and led him through the city square, and he called before him, so shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. Vayashav Mordechai el shar hamelech v'Haman nidchaf el beso avil v'chavui rosh. So Mordechai returned to the king's gate, but Haman pushed himself to his house, or you could also say literally was pushed, and the Renachmias and Ezra and others say that Haman pushed himself, hurting due to his great shame, to his house mournful and with a covered head. What does it mean with a covered head? Haman covered his face in shame and embarrassment, hoping no one would recognize him. Yeah. So someone pointed out, maybe it was let me just get the Erica Brown book again. No, I'm not going to find it. Someone mentioned that like what Mordechai did was a very, very non-Haman thing to do, right? So, what did Haman do after he gets invited to the party? Is he goes back home, invites for all of his friends and his wife, recounts to them his glorious riches and his many sons, and tells about how the king had promoted him and how exalted he was above all the king's officers. Haman said the Queen Esther didn't even bring in the king to anyone except the feast. Anyone to the feast which you prepare except for me. And tomorrow too, I am invited to her with the king. What does Mordechai do after this whole parade? He goes back to his post to serve the king, So it's just like polar opposite of Haman. And that's got to make the king feel good that I'm honoring the right person here, and look, it's funny. Sometimes you get the impression after you read chapter 7 in the Megillah that is it chapter 7, that as soon as Esther reveals Haman and then they kill Haman, it's like Mordecai gets brought out and then made into second in command, and you're kind of like, really, does Mordecai like get promoted that much? But if you read between the lines here and you see this king like realizing with horror that I chose to promote the wrong guy in chapter 3, and like Mordecai is the one who's the real loyal one. Like there is ample precedent for like treating Mordecai and giving him all this honor. Okay, so then Vaisaper Haman Lazeresh Ishto Ulchol Ohavav Ace Kolasher Karahu. Haman told Zeresh's wife and all his supporters. I don't know why it says supporters. Ohavav, all of his friends. Ace Kolasher Karahu, everything that happened to him. Vayomru lo Chachamav V'Zeresh Ishto, and his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, Im mizera haYehudim Mordechai asher hachilosa limpo lefanav lo suchal lo ki nafol tipo lefanav. This is a cryptic phrase here. Truly, since Mordechai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Judean descent, you will not prevail over him, for you will surely fall before him. Odam medabrim imo v'sarise hamelach higiu vayivhilu lahavi es Haman el hamishte asher asasa Esther. While they were still speaking with him, the king's eunuchs came and hurried to bring Haman to the feast Esther had prepared. Okay, so what does the Ralbag say? So he says, "Hatoalos hashloshim u'shmona hu lodia ki Hashem yisbarach lo yazav hatzadik biat harasha." To show you that Hashem will not abandon the tzaddik into the hand of the Rasha. Hello, Tira, don't you see? Ki Haman dima levakesh mehamelech litlos as Mordechai al ha'etz. That Haman sought to ask the king to hang Mordechai on the gallows. Asher know that he prepared for him. V'lo dai shelo hisig muvukasho. Not only did he not achieve his goal, ach huchrach laseslo kavod b'zeh. He was forced to honor Mordechai in this. Sorry, B'zeh ha'ofen ha'nifla, in this wondrous way. Hahu shehikivu b'yirchov ha'ir v'hil bishehu b'ofen ha'nizkar v'kar lefanav kacha yasali shesher hamel chaviz b'karo. Yeah. So again, this is a very interesting thing here. Is that like this seems like a simple idea. So can we get any chiddush from this? Now, I want to make a point here, and Vega, I'm throwing an Eov bone out there, an appetizer to tide you over until after I prepare Eov and teach it to my high schoolers. That I think the question that comes to mind for people who are honest when they read this is, really, like this always happens? And the answer is obviously no, it doesn't always happen. Obviously, you have cases where tzaddikim don't get their justice and where they die. Right? So does that pose a challenge to this whole thing? So the answer is no. Okay. Anyone who studies God's justice will recognize that this is not the laws of physics, meaning that I mean, it may be the laws of physics, but it's not measurable like the laws of physics, where like you can with physics or with chemistry or whatever, you can like do something and 100% of the time it'll happen. But there are so many variables here and so much knowledge that we don't have about the facts that you can't necessarily point to a case where in your eyes a tzaddik suffers something or doesn't get like his reward and then have that as a question on God. Okay. So you could take this reasoning too far and do what Sofar said who's Eov's friend, who says we can never know anything about God's ways. That's taking it too far. But what I want to point out is that I think the derech to approach this is that if you know that there's a principle like this, so for example, you know that there's a principle of mida k'neged mida, and you know that there's a principle of God protecting the tzaddik from the Rasha. So when you do see a case like this, then you should view it through that framework. Okay, meaning that instead of approaching this from the angle of I have my notepad and I'm like keeping score about when does God's justice play out the way that I imagine it should, and when do I have problems with it. That's not the way that's going to get you an understanding of God's justice. The way that's going to get you an understanding is taking the principles you've learned about God's justice and then cultivating it by seeing it in the world, by consciously thinking about it and framing the world like this when you see cases that match. I can't prove this, but this is based on my learning of Tehillim and of Eov, that this is like the derech to go. And I'm not answering all the questions on God's justice. I'm just stating what I would say about this. Yeah, Hudi?
Could this also be pointing out the idea that human beings can't ever really know who's truly wicked or good, just from outward appearances. Like only God really knows what's going on inside a person's heart or head or intentions.
Yeah, so I would say that I don't think the Ralbag is pointing at it, but that's part of my of what I meant by the hidden factors as well. You can never really see into someone's heart, right? Yeah. So I'm just going to write this down here. Is an answer is we may not see this consistently in the world, but when we do see it, then we must recognize it and frame it this way. So like again, to use a recent example here, we say that Hashem is matir asurim, right? That he frees the bound. Now, obviously, there have been many hostages that have been bound and then killed in these last days. So is that a kushya on? Does that pose a problem with the fact that Hashem is matir asurim? And like simple-minded people will ask, how could God let this happen? Congratulations, you've solved the problem. You're the first one to like realize that there are questions of God's justice. Like, that's a very superficial mindset. I'm not dismissing the question. I'm saying that you have to learn EO for this. But what I'm saying is when you do see hostages freed, you should frame that as God freeing the hostages, and you should factor that in as a data point for your investigation about how Hashem operates. And you should also praise Hashem as a matir asurim when you see it play out in reality. So I think that's like the derech for relating to the hashgacha. Okay, one more lesson. I think this is the last one in this chapter. No, two more. 39. Toalos hashloshim v'tisha lahodia sheroy la'adam k'shitztarach la'etza shelo yikatzer mishe'elaso ha'etza l'chol mi sheyesh lo mavo v'nesinas etza bazeh. So when a person needs advice, they should not limit their request to just anyone they know, but should consult all those capable of providing sound counsel in the matter. This will be the cause of you getting the correct advice. Hello, Tira, don't you see? Ki Haman lo tistapik b'she'elaso ha'eta k'shayusham kol ohovav v'chachamav. Haman was not content to rely on just the advice of his loved ones and his wise men. Im lo tiye sham zeresh ishto. But he also needed his wife there, right? So that's the thing. Is like you can have the greatest political advisors and you can have your buddies, but your wife has a different perspective on you. And so she has something unique to contribute. And therefore, you should ask anyone who can contribute anything. For me, for some weird reason, the example that comes to mind here is Walt Disney. That Walt Disney had this policy when he was creating, I think when he was doing everything, but I know certainly in terms of Disneyland, that anyone who worked in the park could come and propose an idea to Disney, and like it could be like the gardener or whatever, and like he would listen to it for everyone. Very ezihu chacham halom mikol adam. Who's wise, someone who learns from everyone. But I think with advice, it's different because advice also relies on the other person's, it relies on the other person's experience, but also they might have a unique knowledge of you that could contribute to this, or a unique relationship on how to give you advice. So you really should take into account everyone. So I think that's the lesson we get there. And again, this is an example of the Ralbag. We learn from Haman that he did a good thing. We should use Haman as a role model in asking for advice. Okay, that's not something you're going to hear on most from Divrei Torah about Megillah. Yeah, Hoodie?
I don't know. I was reading it differently. To me, when I read that, I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking this guy's only asking the people close to him who are on his side, who are thinking the way he's thinking, and also, right. So I was thinking that like this is not like that is how big of a leap is it from people who love him and care about him and his friends and his family to his wife? I mean, yes, you're saying that find that little difference of like she knows him even better and has like a unique perspective, but it's to me it seems like
you are correct. I think if you're just looking at what Haman is saying objectively, then you're correct. Is he stopped too short? But I'm explaining what the Ralbag is saying, which is to show that the Ralbag is highlighting like why did he bring his wife into the picture here, and saying that he didn't want to ask for advice without her. So I'm just trying to draw the lesson out of him. But I think you're right that like he didn't go far enough. He should have asked his enemies. Yeah, Ayla.
It's interesting that the Ralbag brings us down here as opposed to like earlier on when Haman asked advice from his friends and wife, and his wife gave the advice that time.
Right.
Versus
So
now, like his friends gave it.
right. So it is interesting. I want to look back at the lashon here because the impression I get is there he was bragging. Vayomer Haman, no. Vaysaper lahem Haman. So he told them kvod ashrov rov banav, and then here it is Vaysaper Haman lezeresh ishto. Oh, it's interesting. He put Zeresh first. Did that happen last time? Vaysaper lahem es kvod ashrov rov banav. No. Vayave es oavav es Zeresh ishto. Yeah, it's a different order here. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, he didn't ask for advice in either case, but yeah, you're right. The Ralbag doesn't point that out there. Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of that. Let's do the last one, then we'll wrap it up for tonight. This one is also seemingly simple, but toalos ha'arba'im, the 40th lesson, hulodia ki harodif achar hasrar v'hakavod, someone who chases after power and honor, hine hasrar v'hakavod borchim mimeno. So honor and power will flee from him. Hello, Tira, don't you see? Ki Haman harodif achar hasrar v'hakavod. Haman chased after authority and power and honor. Umipnei zeh asa masha asa higia lo hafech v'hu shehutzrach lechabit hashveli mimeno. And because because of this. I think this is a typo here. Oh, because of this, did what he did, received the opposite of what he sought. He was forced to honor someone beneath him. And he was which he was forced to give the kavod to Mordechai. This will also eventually led to his downfall from the world, dying in disgrace and humiliation. Okay, so the question here is, we've heard this idea before. What's the chiddush that we get from here, or like what was going on? How do we see this from the example? I think there's a cool thing here about seeing this from the example, because you could read this and say, well, yeah, Haman was brought down because God stopped Haman and like v'nahafochu, and like overturned everything. So how does this illustrate that lesson? Yeah, Tamar?
I mean, I think in this specific case, it's like the fact that he had to honor Mordecai, and even says like honor someone who was beneath him. He like did his like power grab kind of degraded him.
Can you just elaborate a little bit? I'm not seeing it.
Oh, I'm saying like it's a direct thing. It's not like this is like the way of the world in some abstract way. He like accidentally debased himself by making very obvious.
Okay, meaning when he was trying to. Meaning because of his assumption that this is all clearly about me and I'm going to overreach my thing, that was part of his seeking for kavod and sorah, and that action is what caused him to be forced to honor Mordecai?
Yeah, I would say that, and also maybe interrupting the king in the night.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's a good idea, right? So the more egotistical you are, the more you're going to make decisions that broadcast how power hungry you are, and that's going to make people want to cut you down. That's what we call ayin hara in many ways, is that drawing this negative attention to yourself as being greater than everyone, and then that makes people want to cut you down. The cool idea I wanted to say is try this thought experiment, okay? Imagine that instead of Haman being asked for by the king, what should you do to honor, what should the king do to honor someone? So imagine, and it's talking about Mordecai, instead of imagining that it's Haman, imagine a second Mordecai. How would Mordecai feel if he were asked by the king to honor someone who saved the king's life? He would tell how to honor him. And then what would happen if he were put in charge of leading the king around on the horse? He would feel fine. In fact, he'd be happy, because if two Mordecais both care about the king's honor, and their ego is not such that they would feel degraded by doing this, So I think there's a subjective element here as well, which is that it's not only that Haman's actions, let me just write this down here, okay, is not only did Haman's glory-seeking actions directly result in the king, cutting him down and forcing him to do something lowly. but the very fact that he was so egotistical is what caused him to perceive his parading Mordechai around as degrading. Okay, if Haman were like Mordechai, humble and only interested in doing what's good for the king, then he'd have no trouble parading him around for the king's glory. Okay, so in other words, egocentrism results in both objective and subjective lowering and subjective ego downfall. Yeah, Hoodie?
So this is actually something I also heard from Jesse, but taking another approach is that maybe this is talking about how the extent to which Haman suffered and felt, right, is to do with what his own behavior, meaning his Esther's plan for him, so to speak, or maybe even Hashem's plan through Esther, was that he should just not be able to hurt the Jews, right? Like she was using him as a tool to kind of get Ahasuerus where she needed him. But because Haman was so power hungry, he ended up instilling this paranoia in Ahasuerus, and then also kind of underlining that and kind of convincing him where he was at. And then he ends up getting to this point where he, because of his choices, ended up like dying basically.
Yeah, right. That's a good that's a good point, right? I forgot about the fact that Ralbag mentions the dying thing also. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so this was a slower take than last year, but I think I don't know. I like this. I like this slow read with a focus on the toalos here. And like the Ralbag said, like, you know, these are not all of them. So the fun thing is to read through the Megillah and find your own toalos that you can get out of it. So for example, I bet there's a toalos you can get out of the way Haman went home, mourning and shameful. And so hopefully next year we'll get to do more toalos. Sorry that this year we only had one shiur to do this before Purim. I don't think there's another time for us to do a shiur, but you know, a lot of Torah out there. Yeah. Okay. So tomorrow, Bli Neder, we have our tefillah shiur, and then next week no shiurim on Thursday because Purim and Friday because of Purim. Okay. All right. Have a good night and good Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank
Bye, thanks for
you.
coming.
Good night.